I think Israelis recognize as well from their history, from their experience. 18 years of an occupation of southern Lebanon that ended in 2000, a war in 2006 where they went deeper and stayed longer and suffered losses as a consequence.
In the press that you have told the Israelis that they are in violation of the ceasefire.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to respond to or get into any private diplomatic conversations that we've had.
Thanks very much. Michael Birnbaum, Washington Post. Secretary Blinken, President Zelensky in the last few days has signaled some openness to abandoning Ukraine's effort to regain all of its territory by force in exchange for NATO membership. I wanted to ask what you thought about that strategy, if you thought that was a good idea, and particularly if you thought it was realistic, given that President Trump is about to come into office. And second, a question on South Korea and President Yoon. I and maybe some of us in the press corps were with you in March at the Summit for Democracy in Seoul. Was it a mistake in retrospect to host a democracy summit in South Korea? And are you concerned that Kim Jong-un is going to use this moment of instability in South Korea and transition in the White House to stage a provocation? Thanks a lot.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So with regard to Ukraine, the most important foundational proposition is this: Ukraine and Ukrainians will decide their future. Any decisions that are made about how Ukraine engages the Russian aggression, where it wants to go, what it wants to do, these are decisions for Ukraine and its democratically elected leadership to make. And so from day one, we've repeated and we adhere to the mantra of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Well, Ukraine has to make these decisions. I think what we're working to do in the time that we have left is to give Ukraine, to give our own country, to give all the allies and partners that support Ukraine the strongest possible hand to use next year and beyond. If Ukraine determines that it needs to continue the fight, we want to make sure it has what it needs to continue that fight: the money, the munitions, the mobilized forces. If it chooses to engage in a negotiation, and that assumes, of course, that Putin and Russia have any intent of doing that, then, again, we want to make sure it's from a position of strength. And from my perspective, I think what I'm trying to do, not just with Ukraine, but across the board, is to give the incoming administration the strongest hand to play in all of these areas and to pass the baton in a way that they can hit the ground running, because the world doesn't stop just because we have a political transition underway in the United States. So that's what we're focused on. That's what I'm focused on in the remaining time. When it comes to South Korea, let me just say this. We're obviously watching the developments very closely. This is one of our closest partners and allies around the world. We welcome President Yoon's statement withdrawing the martial law order, and there was a unanimous vote in the National Assembly to reject the decision, and he followed up on that. In our judgment, any political disagreements need to be resolved peacefully and in accordance with the rule of law. Korea has been an extraordinary story, an extraordinary success story over the last 3 or 4 decades. And the story that it tells of building the strong democracy, and one, again, where we see the institutions functioning as they should, is one that we thought was important to amplify and to show. And of course, with Korea wanting to take on the Summit for Democracy, we were delighted at that, and we had a very successful summit. But again, I think Korea is one of the most powerful stories in the world about the emergence of democracy and democratic resilience. And we'll continue to look to Korea to set that example.
For the next question, Ciaran Sunderland with DPA.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Secretary of State. Ciaran Sunderland for the German press agency. My question is about Syria. Does the United States believe that Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine has distracted him or weakened his support for Syrian President Assad in view of the renewed fighting?
Thank you. Look, I think what we've just seen in Syria with the offensive by HTS reflects the fact that Assad's key backers, key allies, whether it's Russia, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Iran, have all, in different ways, been distracted, notably by problems of their own making. And it looks like HTS took advantage of that fact. Right now, I think what's so critical is that we see de-escalation. We ensure that civilians are protected throughout Syria, and maybe most critically, that there's actually a political process that moves forward on the basis of the UN Security Council resolution to try to resolve and end the civil war in Syria. If anything, the fact that Assad has refused to engage in any meaningful way on a political process is also what opened the door to this attack and to the gains that HTS has made on the ground. We have enduring interests, enduring security interests in Syria, particularly the interest in making sure that ISIS doesn't resurrect and doesn't come back. There was a tremendous success by the Obama administration and then completed by the first Trump administration to end the so-called geographic caliphate that had been established, all of the ground and the almost physical state that had been established. It's profoundly interesting to make sure that doesn't happen again. And so our own engagement and presence remains important. Partners who are working to make sure that, again, we don't see a resurrection of an extremist caliphate, a jihadist caliphate, that remains vital. We also have in Syria many foreign terrorist fighters, as well as their families who are in camps. We've been working very hard to see them repatriated to their countries of origin, but there are many thousands who remain, and we certainly don't want to see the foreign terrorist fighters reemerge. So we have an enduring interest here. We're looking at what we can do to continue to shore up that interest, but in the first instance, de-escalation, protect civilians, and then if Assad has any sense for his own, for the future of the country, actually engaging in a political process to end the civil war.
Leon Bruneau with AFP.
Thank you for doing this. I'm going to break tradition. I will only ask one question.
I'm sure it's going to be a good one.
I hope so. I hope so. To stay in the region, Lebanon. Now, I'm simple-minded, but for me, a ceasefire is what it means, no fire. It's a ceasefire. Well, there have been several incidents since the ceasefire was concluded November 27th from both sides. Do you consider that Israel is or has violated the ceasefire that was concluded last week? And is the mechanism that you had set up actually already set up? And then I wanted to ask you on your reaction, your thoughts on a comment by the Israeli defense minister who said, threatened that Israel would be ready to go deeper into Lebanon and would also not make the distinction anymore between Hezbollah and the Lebanese state. Thank you very much.
So first, the ceasefire itself was the product of intense and sustained diplomacy to get it. But any ceasefire, if it's going to be upheld, needs to have something in place to verify it, to deal with any concerns or allegations of violations of the ceasefire. That's what's so important about what we were able to set up, working with France. We have an oversight mechanism. If there are concerns that one party or the other is violating the ceasefire, it comes to us, and one way or another, we engage the parties. That's exactly what's happened. The ceasefire is holding, and we're using the mechanism that was established when any concerns have arisen about any alleged or purported violations. I think fundamentally, both parties, that is to say Israel and Hezbollah through the Lebanese government, wanted and continue to want the ceasefire. The interest that Israel has in making sure that its people can return home to the north, where some 70,000 have been forced to flee their homes since Hezbollah has been lobbing rockets and missiles into Israel virtually every day since October 7th, is real. The ceasefire and making sure that that's sustained is the best way to do that. I think Israelis recognize as well, from their history, from their experience, 18 years of an occupation of southern Lebanon that ended in 2000, a war in 2006 where they went deeper and stayed longer and suffered losses as a consequence. I think they are very mindful that the best way to having enduring security is through what we've established, a ceasefire, but we have to make sure that it's upheld, and we are determined to do that. France is determined to do that. And I'm not going to speculate about what's going to happen in the future. I can only talk about the clear interests of the parties. And Israel's interest is making sure that the terms of the ceasefire are fully implemented by Hezbollah, and that includes moving Hezbollah back to the north. It includes making sure the Lebanese armed forces are effectively deployed in the south along the border, that they have the authorities, as they do, to deal with arms that they find, to deal with infrastructure that they find, and that we have an effective mechanism, again, to deal with any alleged violations, and, as necessary, make sure that the ceasefire can be enforced. That's where we are. I am, again, very focused on making sure that we carry forward. Let's see where we are after the initial 60 days. But mostly what we want to see is people being able to return to their homes, and that's both in northern Israel and in southern Lebanon.
So you don't consider that there's been any violations so far?
Again, that's the entire purpose of the mechanism we've set up and that's being used, which is to say we get reports of violations, we look at them, we engage the parties, and that's exactly what we've done.
There are reports that some in the press that you have told the Israelis that they are in violation of the ceasefire.
Yeah, well,
Is that correct?
I'm not going to respond to or get into any private diplomatic conversations that we've had. All I can tell you is the mechanism that we established with France to make sure that the ceasefire is effectively monitored and implemented is working, and we want to make sure it continues to work.
And for the final question, Sergei Goryashko with BBC Russian Service.
Thank you. Secretary Blinken, thank you for taking this question. So I'd like to follow up with my colleague from Washington Post. Could you please tell which diplomatic measures to strengthen Ukrainian positions before the hypothetical talks with Russia, Moscow, did you discuss yesterday with Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, with other ministers, if you discussed any?
A big part of our focus here at NATO, conversations we had with the North Atlantic Council, with the NATO-Ukraine Council, in many conversations that we've had individually, has been focused on everything we need to do to further strengthen Ukraine as it heads into the new year. And as I mentioned, we're focused in very practical, concrete ways, really on three things: making sure that it has the money, the resources it needs to sustain its economy and to sustain its defense. We've now managed, on the basis of the frozen sovereign assets, the Russian assets that are frozen, to get $50 billion to Ukraine that will be going out the door in the coming weeks, both from the United States and Europe, and that will carry Ukraine for some time into next year. Second, munitions and everything that goes with that, whether it's air defenses, whether it's missiles, whether it's armored vehicles. We're working in a very determined way, again, to make sure for many months ahead that Ukraine will have what it needs. The United States is pushing out the door everything that we can. But beyond that, we have this process long established, Secretary Austin established at Ramstein, to make sure that we're fully coordinated with allies and partners. And that's exactly what we're doing. And we spent time, again, talking about what the needs are and how each of us can play a part in filling them. And then finally, mobilization. This is critical because even with the money, even with the munitions, there have to be people on the front lines to deal with the Russian aggression. Ukraine has hard decisions to make about further mobilization, but these are necessary decisions. We have a commitment, though, for every person, every soldier that Ukraine mobilizes. We're committed to making sure that they have the training and the equipment they need to effectively defend the country. And again, that's what we focused on. Going forward, as I said, Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO membership, but we're focused on this in a practical way. We set up a dedicated NATO command whose purpose is to help speed Ukraine down that path to membership. And one of the things we focused on here was making sure that that command was fully resourced. And now countries have stepped up to make sure that they have the people in place to make the command operational. That, as a practical matter, along with the reforms that Ukraine continues to engage, is what's going to move it to membership in the alliance. So Ukraine is on a clear trajectory that we've worked to establish and that we want to make sure continues through the end of this year and well into next year. And that way, the Ukrainians will be in a strong position to make the decisions that they need to make about their future. If Russia insists on continuing the aggression, Ukraine will be able to deal with it. If Russia is actually prepared to negotiate in good faith, Ukraine will be able to do it from a stronger position. And I conclude by saying this. Look, fundamentally, the extraordinary achievement for Ukraine and for Ukrainians is that this is a country that is still standing strong. Remember what Putin was trying to achieve. He was trying to erase Ukraine from the map. That was the objective, and he has failed. Ukraine has a path where it will stand strong as an independent country, making its own decisions about the future, able to fend for itself militarily, economically, democratically. We have to continue to make the investments necessary to move it down that path, but that is the ultimate success. A strong, independent Ukraine, increasingly integrated with the institutions of the transatlantic community, including NATO, including the European Union. And what we worked to do today, again, was to make sure that it has what it needs both to deal with the immediate aggression, but also to continue down that path to a country that not only survives, but thrives in the years ahead.